huge warm welcome to everybody. It's brilliant. I can see the live transcription at the bottom of the screen, which is fab because it just shows that looks like I said something, a huge wall, it said. Anyway, really brilliant to see you all here. I'm really looking forward to sharing the 6 secrets of success in primary maths with you all. The instructions on this front sheet say please ensure you're on mute, and then do use the Q&A function. As well as myself, I'm Helen Drury, and I'm the Director of Curriculum Programmes for Ark Curriculum Plus and the founder of Maths Mastery. We're also joined by some of my colleagues, including the very lovely Kate Jones, who works with lots of our schools, and so will be very well equipped to answer any questions that you've got. So if you do have any questions, then please do pop them in the chat, and we'll make a start. So my hope is that in the time that we spend together this afternoon, I hope that you're going to gain an opportunity to have some reflection around each of the 6 secrets. I suspect we're all teachers in this webinar, and so none of you will really genuinely be expecting these to have been secrets, but I hope there'll be some thought-provoking insights from the great practice in the schools that we work with, and give you an opportunity to think about how you're already doing some of these things, whether you could maybe do something a bit differently. So with that in mind, hopefully there'll be some kind of top tips, something that you can take away and implement in your practice soon. And then finally, we're also really hoping to give you a bit of an insight into our national partnership of schools and an understanding of how the programme works. So here at Maths Mastery, we have a vision that every single child will love maths and will succeed in their maths. And our mission is really around working with teachers to make that happen. So empowering and equipping teachers to make that happen in schools all across the UK. We are part of the Ark venture, Ark Curriculum Plus. And so our work's kind of grounded in the group of schools that you can see on the map here. So we take an evidence-based sort of evidence meets practice approach, where we're really collaborating with teachers in the Ark schools and also beyond. So originally, we're coming up for sort of 12, 13, unlucky for some years now, since the kind of approach was originally created. And at that time, there were 3 primary schools within the Ark network. Swiftly grew to 9, now 24 within the Ark network. And we really wanted to make sure that each one of them was sort of really at the cutting edge of curriculum design in maths and pedagogy in maths. And every one of those teachers was being as supported as possible to do a really great job to get the best possible maths learning experience for their pupils. But quite quickly, thanks to the Education Endowment Foundation that was interested in the kind of evidence-informed, research-informed approach that we were taking, we started to work with more schools. And Ark Curriculum Plus is now a collaboration between about 750 schools across the country and some worldwide as well, not shown on this map. And we're just really driven by that commitment to success for every single child, and also an awareness, like most everybody on the team has been themselves a teacher, is a really experienced classroom practitioner. And so we have both that commitment to success for all, but also that real understanding of how difficult it can be to turn that kind of mission into a reality sort of day in, day out in the classroom. And so as well as being as evidence informed as possible and as aspirational as possible, we also work hard to make sure that we keep iterating the programmes and learning from the challenges and the successes of the teachers who are making this all happen. So a little bit about what we do before. I promise there are 6 secrets, but I thought we would put the whole thing in a little bit of context to tell you a little bit more about what we do before we crack on with those. So first and foremost, we want to provide really high quality professional development so that teachers' subject knowledge and also their pedagogy is, they kind of got the most important evidence and knowledge at their fingertips. So we provide teachers with an academically ambitious, knowledge-rich curriculum, and that's really kind of coherent and logically sequenced. we also support teachers with kind of putting that into practice in the classroom, including things like developing children's mathematical thinking, which obviously leads to critical thinking along the way. How are we doing? Well, I'm never happy with anything less than 100%, but I try and be happy about these ones. So every year we ask for survey responses from all of the teachers and school leaders that we work with. And these are the statistics from last year. So in terms of increasing pupil attainment in maths and improving the quality of teaching in our partner schools. Obviously, it's great to get those kinds of numbers. Also, importantly, we're the only whole class teaching programme that's got statistical evidence of making a difference to children's outcomes. So supported by the Education Endowment Foundation, we had an independent evaluation done by university who found that comparing the progress of year one pupils in schools who were working with us on the programme with schools with similar starting points, pupils with similar starting points in schools that weren't, the pupils in our partner schools made an additional 2 months of progress in a year on average. So some encouraging signs that the work that we're doing is making a difference to pupil outcomes. And obviously a lot of the impact of our work comes through the experiences of the children and of the teachers in the schools that we're working with, and hopefully you'll hear a little bit more about that this afternoon as well. So what is this? What is Maths Mastery? So as a programme, we try and integrate all of the different kind of possible ways of equipping and empowering teachers. So that includes assessment, it includes implementation support, classroom resources, the curriculum definitions and sequencing, CPD that's math specific and topic specific. So the first little component there around the curriculum, we actually got started before the national curriculum came in for first teaching in 2014. So I was on the team that wrote the primary and secondary maths national curriculum, and we'd begun the work supported by the Education Endowment Foundation to develop this curriculum before then. So as you might expect, there's a lot of alignment, but then we've responded to those changes over time and kept looking at where's the sequencing working, where can we tighten that up, making sure that the kind of composite learning that's in the national curriculum is broken down really thoughtfully into its component parts, and that those are in a really good rigorous sequence. We have induction training, which is very excitingly back now to being face-to-face in the most part, but we also have a brilliantly designed online version of that, which was developed for obvious reasons over the last few years. We have ongoing professional development, which is obviously maths specific and also topic specific for teachers to support the teaching. It's very much a collaborative partnership of schools. So we are constantly learning in the national team from the brilliant practice of teachers in the school and able to share that from teacher to teacher, from school to school. We just had a fabulous national conference last week, which we're all still buzzing from. And then the maths leadership course for a nominated maths lead. So somebody in the school to really drive that change and implementation of the programme. So some of you, particularly those who may have already been familiar with some of our work already, will be relieved to hear that I'm now going to start revealing some secrets. I think hopefully as much of what's going to be useful this afternoon is not so much in the sort of top level of what the secrets are, but in some of the ways that maths leads and teachers have made them happen across the partnership. So the first, perhaps no surprise, is having high aspirations for absolutely every learner in the classroom. We're going to hear a little bit here from Jamie. I might need your help, Kate, with the technology here. So I'm going to click on the video. I suspect that might mean that I'm not sharing anymore. So am I still sharing the PowerPoint, or have I moved to sharing the video?
You're still sharing the PowerPoint at the moment.
Okay, so what I will do is I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to share the video.
Since launching Mathematics Mastery, we felt it's been really successful in helping our teachers plan for lessons to work more collaboratively together, be that in a talk task midway through the lesson and giving that real structure around that task and making it meaningful, leading towards the independent task, or whether it's like every single child, no matter what their starting point in that particular unit, being able to succeed around the same learning intention, rather than different children doing different activities around different learning intentions within the same lesson. Maths Mastery has been brilliant at helping our teachers make sure that all children are achieving success despite their starting point.
So this is a really kind of common experience of the schools that we're working with, that often like people join us, school leaders choose to join us because of those high expectations. There isn't anybody out there who's working in primary education who doesn't have really high expectations of all of the young people that they work with. That's why we do what we do. But what's different in the schools that really kind of make maths teaching a success is that that goes beyond being kind of an aspiration to something that's kind of lived and breathed in every single lesson every day. So this is another school that we work with, Newlands, and you can see in their mission statement that it's very much about all learners enjoying, all learners succeeding in maths. That's typical, isn't it? But what's unusual is the way that they're putting that into practice, so that it goes beyond being a mission statement and starts to be something which is a kind of a lived reality. And it's very difficult to pinpoint because, you know, as an integrated program that works in lots of different ways with lots of different parts and is iteratively developed over time, it's hard to pinpoint. But from the schools that I've been in the past sort of few weeks and months, what's really struck me is the role that the curriculum sequencing is playing in making those high expectations, those high aspirations a reality. So for each of the kind of between 1 and 3 weeks, a unit is about 2 weeks on average. We've mapped out kind of what are the national curriculum expectations that are going to be covered, but then how do we break those down into their component parts? What are the possible misconceptions or errors that pupils might make during that time? What's the prerequisite content that we hope that they've already got a secure knowledge of before they start? And that map for the unit is important because there isn't a different journey or a different map for different children with different starting points. So for every single child, we want to make sure that little blue box up there in the top left-hand corner, we want to make sure that whatever the prerequisite skills are, that they are secure. And we give teachers resources and guidance around how they might do that, and then a kind of suggested route through. And because we are pretty pragmatic, we know that, you know, best laid plans, sometimes lessons might take longer, sometimes you might want to take the content of one lesson and spread it over 2, sometimes things need revisiting, there can be strikes, there can be sports days, there can be nativities to rehearse, like lots of things can get in the way of a kind of typical 2 to 3 week unit. And so we build flexibility in, and we suggest where you might want to have some additional practice or some consolidation. Teachers can plan and adapt those. We also have for each of those units a tutorial which emphasizes those key things. So emphasizes what's the key learning for every child in the unit, what were the prerequisites at the beginning, what's the journey through, and what are some possible misconceptions and ways of mitigating that. So what are the representations or the kinds of modelling that you might want to use in order to ensure that every single child is successful. And then on a lesson level, do something quite similar where we offer guidance around the journey, again for all, through that lesson. And that's in 6 parts, starting with a do now, then an introduction, kind of whole class introduction of the new learning, a talk task where pupils work together on a mathematical activity with lots of discussion, clue is in the name, then a little bit more kind of modelling, moving that learning on, followed by an independent task, which is sort of designed to be independent of the teacher, may or may not involve more pupil collaboration and discussion, and then a suggested plenary for the end. And all of those, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the dimensions of depth later on this afternoon, but all of those sections of the lesson, those parts of the lesson, are designed to make sure that pupils are using and developing their language and communication, their conceptual understanding, and their mathematical thinking in every single lesson. There's also guidance around co-planning for teachers that have the opportunity to do that if you're in a 2 or 3 or more form entry school, or get to work with other colleagues across the school. Guidance on adaptation for pupils with special educational needs, and other kind of support around the planning for teachers. And the final kind of chunk that we've seen make a real difference is that for each unit, there's a pre-unit and a post-unit assessment, and they've been designed with distractors so that they give an indication as to if the pupils give an incorrect answer, what those misconceptions might be. And actually, even before using those with the children, teachers find them quite helpful because they flag what possible misconceptions might be happening in that unit, or pupils might be bringing from their prior learning. We've also, partly in response to the disruption caused by COVID, produced this award-winning intervention package, which has 140 pupil-facing videos, and each of those is around the ready to progress criteria in the Department for Education's non-statutory guidance for maths. So that core curriculum content, particularly in the number topics, they're designed to be supported by additional adults, and they provide an opportunity for where there are bigger gaps, pupils to catch up on those before they begin the learning of the unit. So that is secret number one, is to have really high expectations and to live those out in every lesson. The second is about the approach that really successful schools take to fluency and to practice. Now, that's partly around the clarity that we're able to get through this collaborative working around the curriculum. So if you're absolutely clear on what the most important knowledge is, if you're absolutely clear on an effective sequence through a unit, then you're able to distinguish between those little bits of maths that absolutely need revisiting and you need to get to real fluency, and those other parts of the curriculum where that might be less of an urgent priority. So that kind of clarity around where are we focusing on kind of deepening conceptual understanding, where do we want to get, you know, an important concept very, very well understood, and where are the kind of key facts, you know, for example, number 1 to 10, you know, what are those key facts that need lots and lots of rehearsal. We also have lots of assessment support. So the talk tasks themselves, lots of guidance around kind of checking for understanding, but then on a unit level, the pre-tests and the post-tests, lots of support for teachers to gauge where pupils are at and respond to that. And that includes assessing their fluency with kind of key facts and procedures, and making sure that that's built in. And then because we're using this kind of evidence-informed approach that brings the teaching of concepts and procedures together, we're able to make sure that the understanding of some of these things is built up on alongside that sort of speed and accuracy and fluency. One way that we do that is through maths meetings. So these are designed to be a little bit of time. Some schools that are very efficient manage to make it sort of happen in 5-10 minutes. ideally every day, but at least 3 times a week, where separate from the maths lesson, children are coming together and developing fluency. So absolutely brilliant for teaching concepts like telling the time, where it's very, very difficult to move learners' understanding of that on in a 1 week or a 2 week unit, and much, much more effective to just have little tiny opportunities on a really frequent basis. Similarly, some of the properties of shape or naming of shapes can be very effective to just revisit little and often. And that's kind of very carefully built in to the programme with guidance for each of the terms around what are the key concepts, the key knowledge, the parts of the mathematics curriculum which really benefit from that kind of approach. So secret 1 was high aspirations, and the second secret was around the approach to fluency and practice. The next secret is really about how connected and coherent you can be across a whole school, from kind of nursery and reception all the way through to the end of year 6, by sort of really mapping very carefully the representations, the vocabulary, and the kind of approach all the way through. So we're going to hear a little bit now from Holly from Broadfield on how that looks there. Oh, no, we're not. Oh, we'll perhaps try and go back to Holly later. So the approach that we take at Maths Mastery was based on what all of the fabulous education research, particularly done in the UK, but also kind of internationally, tells us about why it is that some children are really successful mathematicians and other children seem to sort of struggle and fall behind. And what we found from looking at that research is that there are certain things which, if learners find them difficult, they're going to particularly get in the way of them being successful problem solvers. But if you really lean into them and emphasize them and develop them, they can help everybody do much, much better. So one of those is language and communication. One is around conceptual understanding and having those kind of visual representations in your mind when you're working with numbers and quantities and thinking mathematically. And the third, we call them dimensions of depth, is mathematical thinking itself. So the ability to notice what's the same and different, to seek patterns, to think of particular examples, or to generalize. And actually we find that if you try and plan an activity or a lesson to focus on fluency or focus on reasoning or focus on problem solving, you don't always get so far, because there'll be barriers in the way to some children succeeding with those. Whereas by making sure that mathematical thinking, conceptual understanding, and that language and communication is present throughout all of the activities and throughout all of the lessons, you can really make sure that you're building those foundations for the children who might risk falling behind. And also there's a kind of opportunity to really stretch and challenge all learners, so they all get the opportunity to take their thinking deeper and their understanding deeper. So the one, I guess, that we're focusing on here when thinking about the coherence, there's a coherence through all of those dimensions actually in our partner schools, but particularly that conceptual understanding and the fact that as a pupil moves through the school, the vocabulary, but also the imagery that they are using to understand concepts will be really mindfully and rigorously built upon. So they're seeing representations that are familiar from previous units, from previous year groups and key stages, and building on those and extending those in a quite kind of systematic way. Secret number 4 is making sure that mathematical thinking is there for everybody. And I think it can be really difficult, particularly if you're worried about children falling behind, or that they may not grasp a particular concept, or that a certain topic might be very difficult for them. The idea that you're going to also expect them to think mathematically can sometimes feel like, you know, it's a step too far. Whereas we've really seen over the past decade of working with teachers and in their classrooms that the opposite is the case. By making sure that there's an opportunity for mathematical thinking for every single child, you can make sure that maths is a subject where children they're reasoning and they're looking to make sense. They're looking for maths to be meaningful. And that means that they're much more likely to be able to understand the concepts that they're working with. Hopefully we'll have a bit more luck with Teresa.
The idea of challenge has always been sort of an area that can always be improved in schools. And we feel that Maths Mastery addresses that really well in terms of using things like the ideas for depth that Maths Mastery provide means that you can provide challenge for your children at all levels. You're not just challenging your most able and the rest of your children get forgotten. Everybody can be challenged throughout a lesson. That the programme really encourages those different starting points as well. And it also allows the nature of the structure of the lesson allows teachers to be very responsive and adaptive in the lesson and kind of take on the information they're getting from the children and adapt almost in the moment to make sure that we're pushing the learning on in every lesson, which we found really impactful.
Very difficult for me to pick between these secrets. I think they're all so important. And as I was putting together the kind of parts to share with you all this afternoon on each of them, I kept thinking, oh, this is the most important one. This is the most important one. No, this one's definitely. But I'm sorry, this is my favorite. It just makes such a difference to the experience of learning mathematics when the classroom becomes a place where talk is at the centre. And we hear it time and time again from schools that join us as partners, often schools that already value talk, already had keywords in maths, already something that they realised was important. But that kind of shift to putting pupil talk kind of at the heart of the learning of mathematics is such an important and powerful one. Looks like we're going to hear from Teresa again.
Right from the beginning of us taking on the programme, we recognised that the language communication dimension of depth is going to be really important for our school. And also we felt that it would show the biggest impact quickly. So that was our starting point. And we were right, it did show a sort of an impact with our children almost straight away. Just that introduction of the use of star words in every lesson that was expected to be used, using that accurate vocabulary, even if sometimes you think the words are challenging for the age of the child. The children would just absorb it fantastically. And that also that insistence on full sentence responses that we would model as the teacher and expect back from our students has just enabled our children to become such competent and confident problem solvers and has really developed their reasoning. When we took the programme on initially, we found that some of the children in our younger year groups where we were trialling the programme actually could reason their maths better than our older children. So that was a real sign to us we've made the right decision.
To build on Teresa's wonderful ideas there, we did have somebody ask about some clarification on what we mean by a talk task as well. So I don't know if you're coming to that, Helen, but that's one of the questions we've had in, but I don't want to interrupt your flow either.
I don't have any particular slides on it. Would you, just to put you on the spot, Kate, do you want to do a brief intro to the talk task?
Absolutely. So we do have a 6-part lesson, which scares some people when we first say it, but there's absolutely rationale behind it to give pupils more time in the lesson for that exploration, manipulation, and to make sense of that learning and use that mathematical language, which we're so passionate about. So before they do their task independently, there's a section of the lesson where they take some of those ideas from our new learning, our new objective, and talk with a partner and explore that in a mini task, if you like, where the focus is less on recording and more on using the star words and full sentences from the lesson, giving them time to make sense of it. Then we develop that a little bit further before they go off independently. But I can answer any more on the chat if you need to find out any more on that. I'll hand back over to you, Helen.
Thanks, Kate. So this is a little quote from another one of the teachers who we're working with, again, talking about those talk tasks. And I think it is one of the benefits is the fact that you know that teachers teaching the same age children, and actually often kind of disproportionately children with lower starting points, with disadvantage, with special educational needs, like the schools that we're working with, we work with schools right across the spectrum in terms of Ofsted outcomes, and also in terms of sort of the starting points and the socioeconomic environment that they're working in, but kind of disproportionately towards those in challenging circumstances. And at first, teachers always think that the STEM sentences and the vocabulary choices are really ambitious, and they're a little bit kind of nervous that maybe their children aren't going to be able to manage it, and are always completely blown away by the fact that actually by raising the expectations around the language and the quality of talk in the classroom, you can see just what the children are capable of. So, of our 6 secrets, we've looked at high aspirations, fluency and practice, coherence and progression, challenge for all, and embedding talk. And the 6th secret is around the ways of working in the school, and the support for CPD and collaborative planning, with that word collaborative kind of meaning all sorts of different things. But hopefully this last clip from Jamie should work.
So prior to Maths Mastery coming in, a lot of our staff were planning on a rather ad hoc basis, and there certainly wasn't any progression throughout the years. I feel that following the Maths Mastery programme has really helped bring the staff together. It's given that fine structure for us to really focus on as a school, and then it makes training a lot easier as well, because we're able to train around specific areas, and there really does feel like there's more of a whole school ethos around maths now.
And I just wanted to share some examples. I think we had some previously of sort of the unit tutorials, the unit narrative, and the role that those play. But we also have short online video clips, which I've actually recently been told, even for more experienced and expert teachers, can be really, really helpful, particularly if you change year group, for kind of how do I model and explain that? What language would I use when teaching that concept? And so by having that kind of coherence to the planning guidance and the resources that teachers are using, kind of creates that culture where, the kind of the coherence of the curriculum and the teaching approach means that it's kind of easier to collaborate and learn from and with each other. So they are our six secrets. I wanted to talk a little bit about the tailored support that is part of our programs. So in the tailored package, which is our one of the ways that schools work with us in the partnership, we have 2 face-to-face development visits, and those are, again, we're good at naming things to just say it like it is. So the talk task is where the children talk, and the tailored tier, we tailor the visits to the needs of the school, and then also 4 remote development sessions and advice and support by phone or by email. And we are very excited at the moment because the significant evidence that we've got of the impact of the programme means that there's Department for Education funding to work with us. And so the really kind of intensive support program that we normally do at £5,550 is available to schools to join on 1,110. So there's a really, really good opportunity this year to join, and that's a guaranteed subsidy for 2 years. So I think I have come pretty much to the end of the kind of planned content for our time together this afternoon. Some additional discounts there, which is exciting, although 28th of February is no longer relevant, sorry. But we've got a lovely QR code there. And shall I stop sharing, Kate, and we can perhaps open to questions for everybody?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Right, we have got a couple more that have just come through. I've answered this over the chat. We had a couple ask about how we support children, including the higher attaining children, and which I've talked about on the chat, though it's hard to convey sometimes on the chat, about how we use our dimensions for depth for all pupils. And of course we can go into further depth with some. I've talked about the ideas for depth and how we do have suggestions for further challenge embedded into all of our lesson guides, as well as exemplar ideas about how you can take the task sheet and add further challenge. We tend to avoid that sort of just challenge for some, and we talk about challenge for all a lot, but of course that might look different for every child. So we do appreciate that there will need to be an element of differentiation and variance in how we question certain children, and you'll find those questions and examples embedded into those lesson guides. And we do have a question. Okay. Yes, you can, for the questions that have come in, there is a section called Answered where I have answered some of these already. I know that's a comment that's just come in. There's a question on how would you use the programme with a mixed age class? Should I have a go at answering that one, but feel free to chip in. We do have lots of our schools who are in a partnership using a mixed age class. I think we would be dishonest if we would say it's really, really easy. We appreciate that because of the nature of the national curriculum and how things are set up in year group objectives, that there's always going to be an element of perhaps additional thought for a mixed age class. But the way that lots of our schools use the resources is to have a look, and we can support you in having a look at both curriculum maps and aligning where there are opportunities for alignment within year groups. Of course, our curriculum is sequenced in a way that things build upon other things. So often things that are happening in year 3 are being built upon in year 4, and we can make sure that they're happening at the same time. If you do choose the current the programme that Helen's been talking about with the additional support from a development lead, that's something your development lead can work with you on as well. So you'll have opportunities to talk to a member of the team about your context, and they'll also come in and visit if you're on our leadership or tailored package. Anything else to add on that, Helen?
No, I think that it's such a challenging thing to do in any case, isn't it? And there's kind of big decisions around whether you want to teach the content which is in the national curriculum for the particular year group, or whether you want to teach, everybody that a kind of mixed year group content twice or 3 times, depending on how you structure. And of course, there's no such thing as a typical mixed age school either, and so different ways of mixing the classes has different challenges. But yes, we do have a number of schools that we work with who work successfully there. So nothing much else to add. I was going to just add to the answer to the question on challenge, because I know that it's something that schools are often really surprised by, is how much the kind of outcomes in terms of greater depth in the Key Stage 2 SATs increase, and how much stronger. I think it's because the emphasis like the emphasis on talk and language is really an like kind of obsession with like accuracy and mathematical accuracy, and so that there's a kind of whole class shift to being very mathematically precise, and also to be able to really explain and reason, which benefits everybody, and is designed to stretch and extend those children that might be kind of quicker at grasping mathematical concepts, as much as it's designed to scaffold and support for the low prior retainers. And so it's really typical that schools, as well as seeing more children kind of reaching expected national standards, they also see significantly more children kind of achieving at the higher place as well. Who needs an answer next, Kate?
We've got Chris who's asked a question on independent schools and whether our subsidised rate is available for them.
Sadly, no.
Not. How much time do you recommend teaching maths every day?
So some schools join us and it's part of a school priority to improve provision in maths, and they do, at the point of joining the partnership, increase the amount of time they spend. I would say most don't. Most carry on with whatever the time allocation was that they had before. So typically that's about an hour, maybe an hour and a smidge more in sort of Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, bit less in terms of direct teaching in reception, but then obviously lots of opportunities for mathematical learning in free flow or continuous provision. What is different is pulling out a little bit of time, maybe after lunch or after break or at the end of the day for the maths meeting. And that is something that, once schools have embedded it, can be quite efficient. So you can kind of do it in 5-10 minutes in a sort of transition type of a time. Some schools need to reduce the amount of time for their main maths lesson down from, say, an hour to 50 minutes in order to allow that. And that means that they might still do the talk task, still have the new learning, still have that really powerful learning going on, but maybe need to have fewer questions on a task sheet, have less kind of recording in books completed in the lesson time. But they don't see don't think they see a kind of reduction in achievement and attainment as a consequence. So it's not a major shift. Obviously we're in a little bit of a war with reading and writing, and so if it is possible to carve out a little bit more time for maths, then that does no harm, and the team will advocate for that. But it's certainly not a barrier if an hour a day is kind of the amount of time you've got. And we do in fact have some schools that, you know, are only doing maths 4 days a week, or all sorts of interesting patterns that people have. So it's relatively flexible, but the recommended approach is to have kind of an hour every day, and then a little 3 to 5 days have the 10 minutes of maths meeting.
Got a question from Samantha, which is very relevant because we've had our conference recently, asking, do we have national maths training and do we have a conference? And the answer is yes. We've just had our annual conference. It was, you know, really successful, great event. We haven't actually had one for the last 2 years or 3 years in person because of COVID. So this year we've brought it back, and we are also planning to bring back face-to-face induction training, where each school will have a certain amount of places each to attend that training face-to-face. But we are also keeping all of the brilliant work we've done on developing our program to have online training as well. So now there'll be more of a choice element. So we have all of our induction available online if that's easier for your school to access. And of course, that's probably the option that we can get everybody trained on in an accessible way, at a time that suits you, at a pace that suits you. But we have the option of face-to-face training as well available this summer, which is great to have back again, because I know that some of the conversations that we had during the conference and that delegates could have with each other was just second to none. So that's that one. And then a question on maths anxiety. Do you have any professional development that focuses on this? And I wouldn't say we tackle it directly, but we kind of look at it indirectly. In our induction training, we talk about success for all children, and it's a bit of a rationale about everything that we do. We want all children to be able to succeed in maths. We want all children to be able to access problems that perhaps they couldn't access before. We want them to have the tools to do that, like the mathematical language that they need in order to solve a problem. We want them to have the time in order to think about a problem, the opportunities to think, the opportunities to play with maths, to explore maths, so that maths isn't just seen as a right or wrong. So I would say that our programme ethos and our whole principles really do support children, but I don't think we have anything specifically to address that in terms of a training session on that. But we're always looking for things to work on further. And then we have, what does the curriculum mean for teacher creativity or independence? How prescriptive is our curriculum? Shall you answer that, Helen?
Yeah, so the whole intention of the programme is to equip and empower teachers. So we don't intend to prescribe anything. What we have found really, really helpful is, so let's take one example. You could take the national curriculum and you could break it all down into its little component bits of maths, and then you could say, here you go, here's some nice activities that you can use to teach this maths. We suggest maybe 3 weeks, go. And what we find is that actually, like, primary teachers are very busy people. We don't have a lot of time for planning next week, the half term, the term ahead. And so people really appreciate that, firstly, we've given some experienced maths teachers the time to do that thinking about actually how would you break it up and what would you focus each lesson on and how much time would you give the kind of the different units, and made that recommendation and done that planning. Where the programme is most successful is where the head teacher and the school leaders and the maths leads are really clear that that's what the programme is. It's a really strong evidence-informed starting point for the planning and teaching of maths. And as long as everybody is really clear on that, in practice, teachers tend not to change it very much because it has been really carefully thought through and it's a great starting point. But it's super important that teachers are kind of using all of the assessment tools that make sense in their school and in their context, and taking kind of control and ownership of the approach for themselves. So I would say we don't prescribe anything, but all of our recommendations are based on evidence and what's been working in the hundreds of schools that we've worked with over the last decade or so. And so in practice, what's happening in successful schools across the country that work with us tends to look quite similar. What can go wrong is where the way that the programme's led in school makes teachers feel like they have to do things in a certain way or in a certain order. So like it is very comprehensively resourced, but that isn't intended as prescription. That's all intended to be empowering and equipping teachers.
That links quite nicely to Laura's question as well, asking how resourced is our package? Is it fully comprehensive? Does it provide lesson plans, resources, challenges? Is there guidance for us to plan our lessons? And the answer is yes to all of that. So you'll get, for each lesson, there will be a lesson guide, a set of slides, a task sheet and examples of how to scaffold and challenge that task sheet as well. We also have the assessments that Helen mentioned, quizzes before and after each unit to support with assessment, as well as termly assessments. We have all of our training for teachers and for leaders. So it's fully comprehensive, and more, I would say, and our interventions as well. Just checking, I know we've got a couple on the chat as well. we've got, are there any videos of the 6-part lesson in action available before we purchase? And I'm not sure if our videos are on our trial view. I can do a quick check. I wonder if we've got any on our YouTube channel. We can share them in another way, because we do have videos. So it'd just be...
That's a great question, isn't it? Let's try and figure out a way to answer that. Not at our fingertips, no.
If you do email us on info@arkcurriculumplus.org.uk, we can see if we can get something to you, because those videos do exist, Laura, and we should be able to share something via a drive that you can access, so you can see some of the programme in action. I think that's most of them answered, unless we can see any more. Does anybody else have any questions they want to type in now before we finish off? Gifty is asking about teaching maths through her local language if children are finding it difficult to understand what you're teaching. And I would say that's absolutely possible, but all of our resources and pupil-facing worksheets are available in English. So it might take some work from your side, but of course it's possible. Oh, Anushka has asked about some other organisations, and I know earlier a few questions came in about other organisations, about how does our programme differ to others like White Rose, Power Maths, Maths No Problem would be a question that people are interested in. I think what sets us apart. I don't know whether we articulate that, Helen.
I'll try and articulate it generally, which is obviously tricky, isn't it, for a specific question like that? But I think that there's just a completely different starting point, which is that we are a mission-driven charity, and we began and continue to be about collaboratively solving the problem of kind of raising achievement in maths. And that isn't just about underachievement from low prior attainers. It's as much about having more children go off to secondary school and beyond, really loving the subject and thriving in it and studying maths and sciences beyond. And that kind of that mission, but also the really connected way that we work with the schools. So most of our schools that work in partnership with us, it really is a partnership. So somebody like Kate from the national team goes into those schools at least once a year, is very connected, having lots of conversations with them. And we have a kind of obsession with understanding kind of what might make the programme even better, make the challenges that the partner schools are tackling kind of easier for schools to overcome. So we're constantly developing and building new things. And I think that is the key difference. So the kind of the closeness to the schools, the mission, and the iterative problem solving together. So that was really palpable through all the COVID disruption. But now coming out of that, where the gaps have widened still further, sort of really working closely on the intervention materials. So we designed them with a school, we tested them in schools, we got feedback on them. We're seeing real impact with those as a consequence, because we have the videos in there, we've got the support for the additional adults to deliver. And then similarly with like the pre-unit assessments, that's been a real collaborative effort amongst lots and lots of teachers, and lots of feedback and improving it. So I would say it's the kind of ongoing collaboration of it, and that feel of sharing not only a curriculum structure, but also a kind of whole school approach to the teaching of maths with a group of schools across the country, which sets us apart. The other thing that is unique shouldn't be unique, and let's hope that people do catch us up on this, is that we are the only approach that actually has evidence of making a difference to pupil outcomes. So the children are actually making the 2 months additional progress in maths on average per year, which is something that other programs don't yet have.
In the chat, I've just popped a link to where you can sign up for a free trial, and there are lesson videos in there. If you find something, an area called primary overview, and then go on to planning support, you can see examples of lessons. I put a direct link in there for once you've signed up for the free trial. So just copy and paste or save those links for after if you haven't signed up for one yet. And we've got a comment saying that was very convincing, Helen.
It's true.
And then Samantha's just put one in. Any hints on implementation? How do you put into all year groups? I suppose that means, do you do it all at once, or do you do it year upon year? Would you have year groups that would be best to sort of start with as a pilot or to lead with and then build the programme?
Shall I go first, Kate?
Yeah, go on then. We've seen it work both ways, so we've seen it schools do it in all year groups, but we've also seen schools build it up. But yeah, Helen, if you want to see what you think.
I mean that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? So we originally, when we began, we developed the programme year on year, and so our pioneer schools started in year 1, then went back to reception, and then rolled back up through year 2, year 3, year 4. And there's lots of kind of quite obvious reasons why that can be great, because the children going up through the school, you're not trying to introduce an approach in year 5 that expects children to have seen representations in previous years. However, it does mean that you're kind of that momentum around a new approach to the teaching of maths and the excitement of that, that's quite a big ask to maintain that across a 6-year period. And so a nice kind of middle way is to kind of introduce in reception year 1, year 2, year 3, and then roll up into year 4, year 5, year 6 for that initial year 3 cohort. That can be quite a good way of doing it. But actually we do have schools that just introduce the approach right across the school, and it simply means that it's as if you were a school with a greater proportion of low prior attainers in upper key stage 2, right? And then as you roll up, that those cohorts in upper key stage 2 get stronger and stronger because of the really strong foundations they've built lower down the school. But it is a flexible programme, and it's designed for teachers to teach responsibly. So the fact that the cohort's going to be less strong in key stage 2 or in upper key stage 2 initially than they will be eventually doesn't mean that you can't successfully implement the programme, I think.
Yeah, I think it depends on your context, doesn't it? And it works. There's pros and cons as well in terms of upskilling staff in using the programme. Sometimes there are benefits to training everybody at the same time on one day, if you can, and having that as a whole school events in September, getting everyone really excited about it, and then not having to sort of do a big thing like that every year. But there are also benefits to just having 2 or 3 teachers really focused on it, and then getting them to lead the way when it comes to others. So it depends on your setup and those starting points of your pupils as well. Okay. Any further questions before we finish off? Just double check we haven't missed any.
We would love to hear from you. So if there's something you're thinking of, but it's kind of very specific to your context and you just want to ask via email, then do get in touch individually, because we'd love to hear from you.
I'll pop our email address on the chat if anybody wants to do it that way before we finish off. Okay.
Well, in that case, to say very big thank you to all of those of you who are still with us. and wish everybody a lovely evening, and hopefully we can stay in touch, and we'll hear from you all again. Thanks very much. Bye.